everyone, and welcome to another episode of Butterfly Kisses. I am your host, Amy Gray-Cunningham, and today I am joined by Reverend Roger Butts, who has been an ordained minister for the past 20 years. He is with the Unitarian Universalist Church, and today we are going to hear a little bit about his story of spirituality and how he's become a minister and what his life has been like on the road for spirituality and transformation. So please help me welcome Mr. Reverend Roger Butts.
Hello, I'm really
Hello.
glad to be with you today. I'm
Thank you for
coming
joining
I'm
us.
coming from Colorado Springs at the base of Pikes Peak, and I am delighted to be with you. My people are from North Carolina, and it's just an honor to be with you today, Amy.
I am so glad you're joining me. So thank you for taking the time out today to speak with us and share your story. And we are so glad and welcome to have you here.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started on your road for spirituality and what led you to writing your book, Seeds of Devotion.
Here you
Love
are,
that cover.
Seeds of
Awesome.
Devotion. And
Yes.
I listen, I grew up, I didn't grow up Southern Baptist, but I grew up with Southern Baptist in the Midwest. It was about as close to Southern Baptist as you could be. So when the church doors were open, we were in church. That meant Sunday night, Sunday morning, Wednesday night. I had great friends in my youth group, and still have friends from that youth group because of the miracle of Facebook and so on. But when I got to college, I went to Appalachian State, which is up the road from you, up on a
Mhm.
mountaintop up there. I started reading Garcia Marquez and I started reading James Joyce, and my roommate was gay. The one that, my roommate was not my first roommate who hated me, but my second roommate who liked me a lot. And he was gay. So all this stuff that I had been taught was like being exploded by real life experiences and by my reading. And so in Boone, up on that mountain, I was either going to be Quaker or Episcopalian or UU, because those were the groups that were fighting for justice in my town. And so I went on a search, and I ended up in a UU church where there was a Unitarian Universalist church where there had been a breach of trust. There had been a minister who misbehaved, and they were so honest about it, so forthcoming, so real about it. They didn't hide it in shame. They didn't hide it in guilt. They were just like, we got some work to do, and that person has some work to do. The minister wasn't there anymore, obviously. Like, because he was wealthy UU, I think he went to like Costa Rica or something, and with his new beloved. So they had this crunchy old Boston guy who was overweight and loved Shakespeare and the Red Sox and God, but nobody knew in which order. And and then the next year they had this guy who was informed by Taoism. He was like really sort of Eastern and quiet and mystical and had been a scientist. And so I was like, this seems cool. And I became a UU. Moved to DC to work on Capitol Hill. But even when I was on Capitol Hill, I was like hanging out with Catholic workers and like dumpster diving and listening to the Barragans. So I went to seminary to find out. My big question was, how do communities of faith, whether they're this or that or anything, live out their deepest values in the direction of human dignity and human rights? That was my big question. And I've been at it since.
You got it. Have you had it answered yet?
Oh no, 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 no. But
Have you?
I do love those congregations, whether they're big or small, that want to lift up an image that counteracts loneliness, disconnection, that want to counteract the idea of capitalism, that want to counteract the idea that we're like competing against each other and fighting against each other, and lift off a vision of a beloved community where all can flourish. My wife is a minister, And yesterday, she's a United Church of Christ minister, a Congregationalist. And yesterday for Palm Sunday, she had a drag queen preach. Because when Jesus enters into Jerusalem on that little donkey with his band of like misfits and outcasts and is cheered on by misfits and outcasts, those were the equivalent of queer people, of immigrants, of so on. So this drag queen was like, we're going to make a triumphal entry into self-acceptance and love and beloved community. It was beautiful. So that's what I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, how has your view of spirituality changed since first going into being ordained 20 years later?
Yeah. It's shifted a lot. I have become more involved with silence. I have been more involved with contemplation, centering prayer. And when I first got into ministry, because of my own stuff, I wanted religion to be part of solely human rights work, solely social justice work. And as I've grown up and matured and so on, I've come to see that it's a you need 2 feet to walk, one around social justice and human rights and all that, but another one where you're just really in deep prayer and deep silence and just communing with your essential self and that part where it's only known to you and God. And so I've become much more quiet, much more contemplative, and chaplaincy helped me with that a lot, because you gotta own your shit if you're going to be a chaplain. You got to know what's going to trip you up. You got to know what's going to cause you to melt down, and you really have to have humility and self-awareness. And so I've become less assured of answers, less assured of what the right path is, and more curious and open and silent.
What was it like for you being a hospital chaplain when you're in an atmosphere where so many people are coming from many different walks of life? I mean, did you go into a hospital room where there was maybe a Buddhist or someone who was Jewish? Or, I mean, how would you interact with so many different faiths?
Well, because what you have to do is not impose your stuff on them. You have to find out from them what their story is, how they're defining it, where they're finding meaning, where they're finding purpose, where they're finding hope. And whatever their religion or not, more often than not, the people I interacted with had no religion at all, because it's just a different time now. And my job is to help them identify the resources, the resiliency, the hope inside of them, so that whatever their metaphor for God, whatever their poetry for God, that they can see how they've survived difficult times, how they've come through tough times, and where their hope is, whether they're going to live or die or anything else, right? Where their hope is, where their meaning is, and what resources they. And it's true, when you walk into Michael's or whatever, the little hobby shop, and you see the little plaque that says faith, family, and friends. I mean, that's it. Like, Michael's has it. Like, there's like they've got it figured out. That's what I heard over and over and over again, was like the 85-year-old woman telling me about her great love in life, and the old man telling me about his kids. And it's just pretty simple at the end of the day, but everybody's story is different and unique. The blessing of chaplaincy is that you get to hear these things. So in COVID, when I was a chaplain with COVID, I remember and a lot of the book is is around that work of being a chaplain during COVID time. I remember the first time I encountered COVID death. It was early. It was the second person who died in my county in Colorado, and it was early on. And I will say that, people ask me, where did you see God in all of this? Where did you see the holy in all of this? And at midnight, this woman walks into a room where her husband is face down, because early on they thought if you could be face down, your lungs would be relieved a little bit. And he's face down, and they knew that as soon as they turned him over, he was going to die. It was just the end of his life. And so the nurse lovingly putting on that protective equipment for that wife, everybody knowing that this was the last time she was going to see her husband alive, and lovingly taking it off an hour later. And as a chaplain, helping her with the paperwork and so on, praying with her, talking with her. I saw God in that nurse, lovingly putting on that protective equipment. That was the holy for me. And a lot of the book is about stuff like that.
That must have been going through all of that. Wow.
It was powerful. It was a blessing.
Yeah.
It was a nice blessing.
How did you help people go through knowing that they weren't going to make it out alive? How did you help them transition from one state into another state, or one room into the next room?
Well,
I mean, what was that like for you?
It's a great privilege. It's a great blessing. And really, because I worked in a hospital and, bigger hospital, a lot of the people that I saw at the very end of their life were either on a vent and in a coma or morphined up, Some of them weren't. But I was engaged with their family at that point. So some of them would want to hear a psalm, for instance, or some of them would want to say the Lord's Prayer. Some of them, like a Buddhist, I remember a Buddhist guy, he was like, well, I'm not going to make it out of this. And I said, yeah, it doesn't look like it. And I said, what's on your mind? What's on your heart? And if you shut up long enough, people will tell you. If you make it about yourself, people are going to be like, what do I need to share anything about? So the idea is to both be present and not take up too much space. That's the dance. Because if you want somebody to talk, you got to shut up. And if you find that their hygiene or their overweightness or their whatever gets in your little brain and you start judging them, the gig is up. So the key is to go in there with as much compassion and curiosity and courage as possible.
Who do you think God is?
Well, who do I think God is? What do I think God is? When my kids were growing up, now they're 19 and 18 and 15. But I remember when the two older ones were growing up, we asked them that question. And one said, God is love. And we were like, yeah. And one said, God is the earth. And we were like, yeah. And so some combination of that. What I think is the mystics help us to know that whatever God is, God can be found inside of us and in all things, whether those things are shitty or good or whatever judgment we bring. And what I try to do, this is what I've come to, is that I try to see in the face of the other the revelation of God. So whether it's Buddy, your dog, or Gracie, my dog, or somebody who's like annoying the pee out of me, or somebody who I agree with 1,000%, no matter what. And so Emmanuel Levinas, I write about him in the book too. He was a Jewish philosopher, 20th century. His family died in the Holocaust. What he says is the face is a revelation of God before we can make any judgment, before we can make any category, before we can make any thought. We know deep in our bones, before we can do anything, that we have been implanted with the idea, because of the face of the other, implanted with the idea that we know the first principle, which is do not kill. Do not kill. Thou shalt not kill. And I try to live by that. Not that I'd kill somebody, but even, do no harm, You want to hear a little poem that I wrote about chaplaincy?
Yes. Let's hear it.
So my book is a story, and then kind of a prayer, and then kind of a reflection questions. So this is a story after I encountered this woman on the 4th floor on a Friday night. The nurse called and said, "Hey, Roger, this woman is in there. She's going to go to hospice in a couple of days. She is old and her family has left to go home to get some rest. And she's in there. She's a little bit confused." And so I go up there. I was like, "Of course I'll come." And before I go into the room, the nurse says, "She's just in there saying the Lord's Prayer over and over again. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." And sure enough, she wasn't really cognizant, but she's just sort of whispering this. So I was like, I know that prayer. I can do that, So I hold her hand. She doesn't know I'm there, and she's just going on. And then she gets to the end, and somehow she wakes up enough to notice me. And she says, "Oh dear, I seem to have forgotten the ending, but thank you, God, for everything." And I was like, oh, just crying my eyes out. So this is the prayer that I put at the end of that story. And it's not really a prayer, but it's kind of a prayer. It's prayerful. This is about chaplaincy. First, walk gently. You're entering into the great mystery. Sorrow, regret, anger, grief, relief. You never know what you'll find. You may as well walk gently into that room, which will likely be dark and quiet. Second, talk gently. The dead dream and the survivors do too. They're in a fog or out to sea or in the deep woods. Pick your image. But talk gently. That mystery will one day be you and yours. Third, act gently. Your gentleness will invite whatever needs to happen. If at all possible, make it so the wife, husband, mother, child hardly knows you're there. Listen gently. Listen with your eyes and your ears and mostly your heart. The stories will come. Be there to hear them. Stories remind the wife that she is still alive and is alone and not alone all at once. Be the Spirit or Jesus or Muhammad or the Buddha. Pick your guide and be that person. Mary, Dorothy Day, Thomas Merton, it doesn't matter. Of course, you are the best option. So be you in all of your quirky, unexpected, beautiful, flawed, perfect essence.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So that's what I do.
So you get to be you.
Oh, I mean, God. Light your candles. Light your candles. I get to be me and all my quirky, unexpected self. And that's the goal for everybody, right? That's the goal for everybody. There's a goodness at the heart of all creation from which we are born, in which we live our fullest, to which we shall at last return. And that goodness is at the heart of all creation. And if we can live out of that goodness, we'll make a better world.
What would you tell people about why bad things happen to good people, if there is such a thing as God? Just say it.
I would just say theodicy, which is like, why does evil exist in the world where there's a God? That theodicy is an open wound, and there's no explanation. There's no logical pathway. and that every situation is an opportunity to learn and to grow in wisdom and spirit, and that, the bumper sticker has it right. Stuff happens, and there's just not, like, you can spend your whole life, and I know a number of people who do, trying to explain evil, but it's just not very explainable, and it's just something we have to live with. So what's happening in Ukraine, the Holocaust, what happened in Rwanda, all of that, in the face of all of that, you have to choose love, and you have to choose connection, and it sucks. It's hard. The fact that your mom's gonna die, your dad's gonna die, your loved one's gonna die. You want to hear a funny story about that?
I would love to hear a funny story about that.
So my favorite moment in ministry, and I've had some good moments in ministry, but my favorite moment in ministry is, I was the minister of a church here in Colorado Springs, and we did a whole year series where we would have a guest for a potluck from a different religion. So like humanist, Buddhist, Christians, Jews, Muslims, all of it. And this imam came, and he was, the head of the Muslim community, and he was a friend of mine. He's a good guy. I was with a very diverse, but mostly humanist congregation. And, sometimes they could be a little curmudgeonly, a little cranky. And so, but these potlucks were great. And then we would spend Sundays like thinking about the themes from these things, right? So of course the Christian came in December, because our main squeeze, Jesus, was born in December, supposedly. But it was fun. But the Muslim guy came, the imam came, and in the potluck, we'd eat together, and then afterwards the person would say, "This is why I'm Christian," or "This is why I'm Jewish," or "This is why I'm Muslim." And so, and this is what I love about it, and blah blah blah. And then there would be Q&A, and there's this old woman in the back, and she's just like curmudgeonly old woman, cranky, doesn't believe any of this religious stuff, but loves her community. Raises her hand. "Imam, thank you for being here. I want to know about these 1,000 virgins." And so, what's up with that? And he's trying to be nice, trying to connect and be nice. And he's, "Oh no, no. We think that you'll be reunited with your loved one, your spouse, in the great beyond." And she says, "Oh no." she was looking for a little bit of a upgrade in the great beyond. So anyway, that's my favorite ministry story.
That's hysterical.
Is that funny? So my point is, no matter what, whether you're a chaplain or a minister or a seeker or a finder, you can't take stuff too seriously, because heartache happens, and life is going to get you, and you're not going to make it through. And we don't know what's beyond, but right now we can choose love, and that's all I'm here to help people discover.
Why do you think we have so many different religions?
Oh, because metaphors abound. I mean, like, my colleague, my friend Meg Riley, has a sermon called "Metaphors Be With You." You get it? Like, may the force be with you, metaphors be with you.
I love it.
I know, isn't that great? Because like my love language, my God language is going to be different than yours. And so having Muhammad go on his night journey, which is also in this book, and discovering Allah, and just meeting with Allah, and doing all that is a great metaphor. And having Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, and telling those disciples, like, once I called you student, but now I call you beloved. Um, all those different metaphors. Moses leading those folks out of Egypt, like, those are great metaphors. So we can't get to there. We can't get to the ultimate answer, but these metaphors invite us into curiosity and connection. And if we can stay humble and self-aware, then we can know that our metaphors are good for us, but don't need to be imposed on anybody else's ass, like, you do your metaphor, I'll do mine, and let's learn from each other.
What do you think our purpose is for incarnating in this world? I mean, just to just be and then die and
Sure.
back again, or
I don't think we come back again. I think we just become little dust. I mean, I think the Episcopalians got that right. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, right? I do love Ash Wednesday. I don't know. Our purpose is to grow in wisdom and spirit, and to become as much like our metaphors as we can. That when Jesus says, "Love your neighbor," and love your God, and love your neighbor, and love yourself, I think that's pretty much it. When Jesus says, "Love your enemy," then you're like, oh shoot, this is harder than I thought it would be. Right now, I think we've in this current incarnation, and many of our previous incarnations, we have, in America and the United States, we have really forgotten that love your enemy stuff. That in a democracy, there's no enemies. There are people who see differently, but there are no enemies in a democracy, and we have forgotten that.
what are some ways that we can start loving our enemies?
Yeah. You know what Byron Stevenson says, the guy who was the anti-death penalty activist, who like decided to go to law school because it was the easiest pre-graduate school exam to get into. He decided, and he got into Harvard. He's like, okay, brilliant guy. But he says proximity is everything. Proximity is everything. So if I can encounter somebody who is Mormon, like, I don't know much about Mormons. If I can encounter them and stay open and say, what's a Mormon? What is a Latter-day Saint? And just be curious and courageous about asking the question and being with them, then I'll learn. I'll learn about them. If proximity makes it very hard to hate somebody. And so I think proximity is the key. And that means putting ourselves in situations where we get outside our bubbles, where we get outside our own stuff, and listen. I can listen to liberals all day because I'm a liberal. I can listen to liberals like from sun up to sundown because I know which channels to go to, and I know which people to listen to, and I know which podcasts to listen to, and I know, but I want to be with like folks who are very different. Like the other day I was on a podcast with a guy who was like, I don't know, from Jersey, and a cop, and like probably a Republican, and 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 we just hit it off, right? I mean, like, I don't have to agree with his politics to hit it off with somebody. If I see within everybody a revelation of God, then it's hard to kill them. It's hard to break their kneecaps. It's hard to, shun them. So that's what I come up with. What do you think, Amy Cunningham Gray?
Oh, I think the same thing. But for the grace of God, there go I. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like we're all screwed. We're all Michigana, you know that Yiddish word? Crazy.
Yeah.
We're all crazy. You might as well embrace each other's craziness.
Yeah. Everybody's a mirror for me.
Oh yeah, that's good. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good. You should write a book. You should
Maybe one
write a
day.
book. You should write a book. Um, I want to hear. So I want to hear all your stories. God, I spoke a lot. Would you like to hear a blessing before we end?
I would love to hear a blessing. Yes.
And your readers or your
Yes.
readers? Look how 19th century I am. All your listeners. This is for you and all your listeners.
Yes.
This
Please.
is a prayer after my telling of the death of the Buddha. You know,
Death of the Buddha. Okay.
when everybody's looking at the Buddha like, what are we, wait, you can't die. What are we supposed to do now? You can't die. Like, what? You can't leave us. And the Buddha's like, I've done my thing. Go
Time
and
to
make
go.
yourself a light. Go and make yourself a light. You know.
Ooh.
Here's my prayer after that. May life surprise you today. May a sense of grace come out of nowhere in the middle of your daily tasks. May a sense of peace find you in the unlikeliest of places. May a sense of courage and renewal find you. May God's love surround you. And may a gentleness, a returning quietness, and a restoring stillness be with you now and always. A restorative wholeness is yours to claim and embrace. And may faith, hope, and love be your constant companions. God bless your day. Amen.
That's awesome.
Thank
Thank you. You are awesome. Well, I
You're
have one
awesome.
final question for you before we end.
Yeah.
Well, two final questions.
Yeah.
The first one is, and I ask all the guests this, if you were to sit on a park bench with someone and that person be alive or dead, and you had an hour to sit and talk with them, who would it be and what would you talk about?
There's so many people in my dinner party, but right now I'd probably say the poet Carl Sandburg. You know, I just really love Carl Sandburg. He grew up in the same town as I did, and
Really? I
yeah,
didn't know that.
Galesburg, Illinois. And
Awesome.
he was feisty. You know, he was feisty, and he was funny, and I like his poetry because it's just plain language. So I'd probably talk to Carl Sandburg today.
What'd you ask
But
him?
I'd ask him about his poetry. I'd ask him about his socialist organizing. I'd ask him about his lifelong. He was awarded a lifelong membership to the NAACP for his writings. He's just a great guy. I'd just be like, what was Galesburg like 150 years ago? He'd be like, it was boring then, it's boring now, Roger.
Nothing's changed in 150 years.
No, no. But yeah, that's probably who I'd talk to right now.
That would be, yeah, that would probably make for an interesting conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, two dorky old white dudes talking. I mean, where's the downside?
No, I can't see one. Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah.
What's the
Well, how can people find you? Where can they find you?
I have a website called PastorRogerButts.com.
Roger Butts. Okay.
And Seeds of Devotion is I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all that. I'm not on Snapchat because I'm 100 years old. Like like I don't know what a Snapchat is. That's my kid stuff. And TikTok, I don't even know. But PastorRogerButts.com, it's a new little website. And then I write at contemplativelight.org, and I write on Medium. And Seeds of Devotion is available at barnesandnoble.com and Amazon and Bookshop, and your local bookstore can find it. The UUA has a bookstore which is really good called In Spirit. It's available there.
Well, I will make sure I have your website on the show notes and all that, and your Facebook and LinkedIn and all that as well. So definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Roger, thank you for being on the show today.
I was really
fun.
It's been fun, and I enjoy your Southern accent, even though you're from New York.
Don't tell anybody. Shh.
I know. Yeah. Like hit the not recording button, But yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's really been a blessing to spend time with you.
It's been so much fun. It really has. It's been a hoot.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We'll talk to you later, okay?
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Butterfly Kisses, a journey of spiritual transformation. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe by hitting the subscribe button. This way you won't miss it when a new episode is released. Also, if you're interested in learning more about Akashic Record readings, you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with me by visiting my website at amygray-cunningham.com. Again, thank you, and remember, always spread your gorgeous wings, my friend, and fly. Until next time, see ya.